Hello and welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to be working with for loops in Python. So a for loop in Python allows you to run a specific set of codes or lines of code over and over again for a certain amount of times. So with a for loop, you generally know how many times your loop is going to run. And in this case, you can specify how many times the loop is going to run by using a range of numbers or by using a sequence that has multiple values in it. So getting started, we'll start with the range function. So your range function is actually going to allow you to specify how many times your for loop is going to run. But to create your for loop, first you would type in for, and for is how you would start it. Now, for has to be lowercase. All of it needs to be lowercase for the for to be correct. So, for. The next thing that comes next is what you can call your iterator, or basically it's just a variable to keep the current count of the loop. And this can be anything you want it to be, just like a variable. So you can name it anything you want, but you just have to remember what it is. But in this case, we're going to be using numbers. So I'll say for number in range, and the range is going to be specified by us. Now, with range, you can give it a starting value, a stopping value, and an increment value. And right now, we're going to use range with the stopping value. So what number do we want to stop at? Now, when you're working with range and a stop number, you have to consider that it's going to stop at that number. It is not going to include the number that you put into the range function. So if you want to include it, you have to add one to that number. So in this example, let's say we want to print out the numbers 1 through 10. So if we want to print out 10, like I said, it will stop at 10 if we did this. So if you run this, and we could say we want to print out the number. If we were to run this, it's going to run through all the numbers and it's not going to print out 10. So if you want to print out 10, you have to add 1 and print out 10. So here is a simple for loop that would pretty much start at 0 and print out all the numbers to 10. So if you look here, the number constantly changes automatically, because as soon as it reaches the last line of that block of code, which since we only have one line, it doesn't take much, it's automatically going to increase number by 1. We do not have to tell it. Now, if you wanted to increase number by 2 yourself, you can do that. You could say number is going to equal number plus 1. Of course, you could have did it the other way as well, but I'm just going to do this so you can visibly see the number increasing and restoring its value. So if you click that, then it still works the same. If you were to change this, then you will get the same thing over and over again, because you're not doing anything with number here. Although you're using it here, you're changing the value, but it's still keeping that iteration count here. So number is really just for your iteration count purposes. So just keep that in mind. Yes, you can establish number here and store it as another variable and try to change it, but for the most part, your number value is just going to stay exactly what it's supposed to be. It's keeping the count of the loop. So what count of the loop is it on? So the loop will start at 0 and it goes all the way to 10. So that was just an example of how that variable works and what you can do with it. So I'll take that back out, and as you see, we still get the same output. So that is how you would use a range in that case. Now you can specify the starting value. So for example, we could say that we wanted our number to start at 1. So we could say for number in range and then you could put 1. So we're going to start at 1 and we're going to stop at 11, and then that will start from 1 to 10. So print counting up, and then you can say print number. So it's going to print both of these lines each time it runs. So as you see here, counting up 1, counting up 2, and so on until it reaches 10. So that is how you can specify where your loop starts. So the first example, we didn't specify where to start our number, and the default is always 0 if you don't specify where to start. And this one we specified to start at 1 and end at 10, or we're ending at 11, so it will print out 10. So just keep that in mind when you're creating your for loop, that you have to consider what you want to do. Now there's also the case where you can increment the number inside of the range. So let's say we wanted to increase the value of number by 2 each time the loop runs. To do that, you would just do for number in range. So we'll put our starting number, we'll say 2, and we want to say we want to go to 20. And we'll put that we want to increase our number by 2 each time it runs. So this is basically saying we're going to start at the number 2, and we're going to increase it by 2 every time until it reaches 20. So we're going to say print counting up by 2. Then you could say print number. Click run, and as you see here, it says counting up by 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and remember, it does not include 20 because we told it to stop when it hit 20. So when it hit 20, it did not proceed. Now let's say in theory we add 1 to here, and then there you go. It prints 20 out. So remember, if you want to include that number, you need to add 1 so that it will print out. So here we are printing, and I'll put a comment, printing 2 to 20 evens. All right. And that will be an example of that range. So overall, these are 3 different ways you could use the range. Here we're just using where the number we want to stop at. Here we're using a start number and the stop number. And here we're using the start number, the stop number, and the increment number, the number we want to increase by. So those are some range examples. You can also use for loops with a sequence. So a sequence is a collection of values, and a sequence could be a string, it could be a list, it could be a tuple, so on. All of those objects have various values within them. So a string is just a collection of letters, and it has a sequence of characters that we can use to increment over. So when we are using our for loop, we can iterate over each letter and access it and do a certain task with that letter. So in this case, we can definitely start off by creating a for loop that uses a sequence. And the simple sequence we're going to use is just a string. So you can say for letter in, and then we'll put a string, so we'll put Python. Then we want to say we want to print the letter out. And if you do something simple like that, then you see it just basically accesses each letter one at a time in the sequence and prints it out. So if you remember, this is our 0 position. So when it first starts, letter is going to be 0. So it's basically going to start P, which is 0, and then it increases to 1, which is Y, and so on and so forth. And that's why it's accessing each independent letter by itself, because it's just adding to the value of letter, and letter will start at 0, so it's going to find the 0 position of Python and continue on as it increases. So that's a quick example of that. Now let's say you wanted to do something when it reaches a certain letter. So for a letter in Python, and actually I'm going to show you another way to do it. You could store it as a variable, so we could say string 1 is equal to Python. And here you can use that variable name instead of typing it directly. Then we want to print letter. And if you see here, we'll still get the same output. So it doesn't matter each way you do it. They're both going to give you the same output. So just keep that in mind, that it really doesn't matter. It's just up to you and your preference, but you can do it either way. So getting back to this example, let's say we wanted to do something when it hits a certain letter. And that's when you can use a if statement. So let's say if letter is equal to y, so we'll say y. I'm going to print Python contains the letter y and equals, and hit run. And then you see here it printed out y, and then it says Python contains the letter y. So for that iteration of y, it printed out this statement. As soon as it was no longer y anymore, you don't see this happen anymore. So you could technically do this for each letter. So you could do else letter, or elif letter is equal to, let's say, O. Then you could have another print statement like O is in Python. And click run, and then you'll see that come out to the output. So you can put multiple options or put an if statement inside of a for loop to give it multiple options to execute when the loop is running. So this makes your for loop more interactive, and it just pretty much gives you different options. So you can use if statements and elif statements in a for loop to do something for a certain letter or a certain object in a sequence. So let's check it out with a list. So we'll get a new section of code. So list and for loops. So let's say we want to create a list that says colors, and it's going to equal, we'll put red, blue, green, black. And we want to create a for loop to go through the list. And it's basically going to say for color in colors. So we're saying for each color in colors, we want to do this. So print out the color is, and here you could put color. Click run, and then you see it simply prints out the various colors that are in the list. You could also say the color list contains, and then it will tell you all of the colors that are in that colors list. Now that you have that, you could also say, for example, if you wanted to put out something if the color is equal to something else, similar to our last example. So we can say if color is equal to, and let's say blue, we could say print the sky is blue. Click run, and then you see it outputs that, and you can use different options. But let's say you wanted to stop your loop, and that's when you could use break. So the break statement is pretty much going to stop your code or your loop code from running after that point. So take note of our output here. You see it does red, blue, the sky is blue, green, and black. So if we click run now with the break, let's see what happens. And now you see we only have red, blue, and the sky is blue. So when you use break, break is pretty much stopping your loop from executing completely. It's telling your loop to not run anymore. So when you tell it to stop completely, then it no longer will print out the green and the black because you told it to stop when it hit blue. So in that example, you could also take this out, and then let's say you want to stop it when it's green. So you can say elif color is equal to green, then you could just say break. And that's just going to stop it once it reaches green. And here you see it stop once it reaches green, and black never happens. So your break statement is going to literally break the loop. So remember that. Break statement breaks the loop. And once it's broken, it's not going to start again. So that's something you could do. So you also have the option of doing a continue statement, similar to the break statement, where it will stop running some lines of code for that particular color. So I'll copy this and we'll just reuse this. Save time. So we have that, and I'm going to take out this. So I'll say here, I'll add more to our list. So I'll say print the grass is green, and here I'll add another color, yellow. And outside of my else or my if-elif statement, I'm going to add some more lines of code for our loop to print out. So we'll say print I like that color, and we can say print what is the next color to make it more interactive. And if we click run, then you see our output has a lot more because we have a lot more code up here. So now if you see here, it says the color list contains red, and it says I like that color. What is the next color? Then it goes to blue, and it says the sky is blue, and then it printed out these two lines here. Then it goes to green, and then it says if the color is green, then you're going to print out the grass is green, I like that color, what's the next color, and then black, and I like that color, what's the next color, and so on for all of the things. So what you could do is here you could say continue. Now keep note of what happens here. So when green is called, it does this. This is all that happens with green. It says the color list contains green, the grass is green, I like that color, what's the next color? So when you do continue, it's actually going to continue through that iteration of the loop, and we'll run it to see what happens. And then you see here, it just says the grass is green. So continue pretty much tells your code to ignore any more lines of code after continue just for that specific iteration. So we're just saying we want to ignore the rest of the lines of code while the color is equal to green. So these two lines do not happen because the continue statement ignored them, so they don't see it after that point. However, once the the loop starts again and starts at the next color, which is black, remember the continue statement is only attached to green, so the black is going to continue to run, and there you see it says I like that color. What's the next color on the next one? So the difference between the break and the continue is the break is going to completely stop your code from running. It's going to stop it. So you see here we never made it to black. Here with the continue statement, we said continue on green, and it did not print the remainder of the loop. So if for some reason you don't want to print the remainder of the loop out or complete the remainder of the actions in the loop for a specific object, then you can use continue. But break is used if you don't want to run the loop anymore once you reach a certain object. So that's the difference between the two. You can also have a nested loop. So that's a loop inside of a loop. So here we can have some names, or let's just do colors again to save time. So I'll come up here and take colors again. And I am going to have a for loop that's going to run through those colors. So for color in colors. Then we could say print colors. Now you can have your nested loop, and that nested for loop is literally going to be another for loop inside of a for loop. So we can say for letter in color, then we want to print out letter. So this is basically going to print out each color here, and then it's going to print out each letter independently of that color. So click run, and then you see it printed out red. So it printed out the list. It prints that out because here I said print colors. So it's printing out colors and not color, but it's using color in my nested loop here to access each color in colors independently and get the letter from it. So I'm printing out what the list is, and it's spelling out red, blue, green, black, and yellow. So that is why these variables here are kind of important. It's storing the object, and you can reuse it in other places in your loop. So I'm not necessarily using it here, like what you could do. So I could change this to color, and then you'll see it's not going to print the whole list, but it's going to print just that color. So you have to determine which variable you want to use. Do you want to use color or do you want to use colors? It doesn't matter which way you do it, but the output is going to be different. So you could technically put here that you want to print out colors each time, the colors list each time, and then you see it prints it out, the list, then it prints red, and then it spells it out, then it prints blue, spells it out, so on and so forth. So that is a nested loop if you want to access various objects in it. So overall, that is some basics you can use with loops. There's various things you can do, but it just depends on the actions that you want to execute. So these are just the foundational basics that you need to get started in loops, and hopefully this was helpful. And maybe in the future I'll create a more advanced video to show different things you can do with loops further than this, but this is just the introduction. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one.